Have you heard about the greatest suffix in the English language? It's a scandal. Hello and welcome to Ellroy Reads. This is the show where every week we look at a book that has inspired James Ellroy, a book that has moved him, thrilled him, amused him, and made him pick up that pen and write some of the great novels that we all appreciate today. Today's episode is on Thomas Mallon's Watergate. This is a fantastic novel, and if you're curious about that humorous intro, it comes from the fact that gate has become a well-known suffix for many, many scandals. Now, it started in America, but it has spread, particularly to Britain. My wife's American, and when she first moved here, she was shocked how we put the word gate on at the end of any scandal, no matter how small or insignificant. Sherrygate, Camilla Gate, Cake Gate. It really has kind of spread completely out of control. But that just shows you the influence that Watergate has had on popular culture and its titanic influence in American history, which is still being felt today. I feel, particularly during this presidential election, there are many, many parallels with what went on in the early 1970s and what's going on today. Okay, so Thomas Mallon we've covered in a previous episode of this show where we did Mrs. Payne's Garage. That was a wonderful book. Well, that's non-fiction on the Kennedy assassination, and this is actually fiction. It's a novel take on the case. So to give you a bit of background about Thomas Mallon, he is a distinguished writer. I won't repeat his biography again, but I will say that he met James Ellroy in the 90s when they were both columnists for GQ. And they became friendly, but when I interviewed Mallon, because I was writing James Ellroy's biography, Love Me First in Danger, he said that their friendship didn't take off until much later, at least 10 years later, when someone passed him a copy of Mrs. Payne's Garage, and that was a revelatory text for Ellroy. Mrs. Payne's Garage converted Ellroy from a conspiracist about the JFK assassination to someone who subscribed to the lone gunman theory, because Mrs. Payne's Garage really skewers all of the conspiracy theories and the kind of all of the artifice around them and all of the false foundations that are holding them up. It's a very, very good book, but it's also sympathetic to the belief system that makes us inclined towards conspiracy theories, and how it can be penetrated to a more rational worldview. So Watergate, how would you best describe Watergate? It is not trying to debunk any conspiracy theories that have developed around Watergate. If anything, this is much more playful and more subversive. It might be actually building them up a little bit. It is fiction. It follows the main cast of characters in the event. So obviously Richard Nixon, his wife Pat. There's a lot about their marriage. Many of the main players, Haldeman, E. Howard Hunt, people who were convicted and did time for the burglary and the various conspiracies around it. But some of the lesser known characters of the time, for instance, Fred LaRue, who was essentially a bagman to the scandal, he was paying off the burglars to keep them quiet, so they had to do their jail time. And he forms a major character in this book, and Mallon says he was the character he fictionalized the most. There's an ongoing mystery about an envelope that LaRue has with the words Moot written on it, MOOT, and what appears in that envelope. And it is actually solved. This is a fictional mystery, but it is solved. It doesn't cheat us on that. Two other characters who get a lot of play here are Rosemary Woods, who was the Nixon's secretary, who accidentally erased, or did she, 18 and a half minutes from the Watergate, from the Nixon tapes. And there is kind of explanations, although kind of clouded in ambiguity as to what she did there. We do get a little snippet of what may have been on those tapes. Of course, at first she says, I only erased 4 to 5 minutes, which was Nixon's explanation, and then it transpires that 18 and a half minutes of the tape are gone. And finally, the third character, who I think like there's less history on, or there's less related to her connection to Watergate, is Alice Roosevelt Longworth, who is an absolutely fabulous character in this. She was the daughter of Theodore Roosevelt. She's actually the longest lived child of any US president. and she's at the end of her life during the events of this book. But she has been a socialite, a noted wit, a doyen of Washington society, had a long-standing affair with Senator George Buller, and actually had an illegitimate child from that relationship, Paulina, who sadly died young. And she delivers a very, very caustic take on all of the events that are unfolding. She's an absolutely joy to be around. She's like the Dowager Countess in Downton Abbey. You just can't wait for her to turn up. It follows these characters through their connection to the events right up till their deathbed. Nixon, Roosevelt, Longworth, to the last day on Earth, where they're still trying to figure out what happened. It doesn't really dissect the events in a clear-cut manner in the same way that All the President's Men does, as best it can, puts things through in a comprehensive manner. In this, these guys are like these Shakespearean tragic characters. They don't know why ill fate has befallen them, and they're trying to figure out how it happened. Why was the break-in authorized, and then why were the payoffs authorized afterwards? They had to, and they're in the White House, and there's a lot of society balls, and it could be a Victorian novel in that way. There's a lot of grand functions, foreign visits, and really all of the trappings that come with being the head of state, being a monarch in all but name. But there's this tidal wave that's going to sweep them all away because of a third-rate break-in, badly botched, that spirals completely out of hand, and they can't figure it out. And that's quite refreshing to read because I think, most of us, apart from, most learned scholars on the subject, would struggle to name every character in the Watergate dilemma or every single thing that occurred and why it occurred. Most of us remember the little things, or if you were born afterwards, you've picked up stuff from its take in popular culture, like the Suffolks or the videotapes of the hearings, and who had the most, John Dean's very attractive wife, who who would have gone viral today. She would have become an Instagram star, or and things like that. Now, how it inspired Ellroy, I've spoken to Ellroy about this book. He has great admiration for Ellroy. I wouldn't say it was a direct influence in any way. And before he read this book, he was always adamant that he wasn't going to do Watergate. He's the great American historical novelist, and his Underworld USA trilogy, it started in 1958, goes to 72. The LA Quartet, it goes back even further than that. But he's essentially, Ellroy's plan was always to stop at Watergate. And when you read Bloods Are Over, his final novel in the Underworld USA trilogy, there are just hints that Watergate's to come. There's the surveillance, which is really part of J. Edgar Hoover's surveillance state, this kind of statelet, or country within a country that he's created. There's hints that will unravel, but really the death of J. Edgar Hoover is for Ellroy the death of that period. And post Watergate, Ellroy's been quite candid that there's more accountability in American politics and in American public life. And that's not great for an historical crime novelist. Corruption really is what Ellroy does best, or at least the rendering of it in fiction. And another reason that he kind of bypassed it is that it's not really violent crimes, other than, actually lives were destroyed in the smearing of people's names, people went to prison, obviously the break-ins, but it's not like the Underworld USA trilogy is essentially, an assassination trilogy. I wonder if there's anything in it, though, that has tilted Ellroy just a little bit more to this worldview, in that, this is a wonderfully catty book. It's caustic. It's looking at the world sideways, which, with a thing like Watergate, or even with a thing like what's going on today in the world in the presidential election, which is less than a month away at the time of recording, and no one knows what's going to happen, or even if the result will be accepted by all sides, or if there will be violence. We're really in a very, very kind of tenuous grip on reality or grip on sanity at the moment. But I feel like with Ellroy's novel, say The Enchanters, about Marilyn Monroe, that he he took on a bit more of Mallon's kind of caustic wit, um, subliminally, and he brought a lot more of that to Hollywood, and then kind of embraced the absurdity of it. Sorry, I'm getting messages, and that I felt that was one of the stronger aspects of the book, especially after Perfidio in this Storm had been, I think, too dry, too grinding. I was really pleased with Ellroy, and relieved and happy that the Enchanters had that. I mean, even in its title, it's kind of like this enchanting kind of like artificial world, but very colorful, very alluring. That's very much what Washington D.C. in the early 70s has portrayed that. Obviously, the Kennedy family is still highly influential, the mark they left on politics. And Nixon himself is portrayed quite sympathetically. Mallon is a conservative. He's a charming man. My interaction with him was slightly strange because I was interviewing him for the Elroy biography, and he sent me loads of stuff. He sent me documents, he sent me folders, he sent me email exchanges, he sent me absolutely loads and loads of stuff. But he was still quite evasive. And when I checked in with Elroy about the interview, I said Thomas Malone kind of reminded me of Nicholas Branch in Libra, because he sent me loads and loads of stuff, but he didn't actually tell me much. And Elroy thought that was really, really funny. And it was always a big thrill to make Elroy laugh. It was one of those really nice moments. So, but Malone is a conservative, just to go back to my original point. So it's probably no surprise here that his portrayal of Nixon is quite sympathetic. I mean, Nixon can be quite amusing. It's odd because, in one sense, he's very, very socially awkward, but there is a lot of talk of him playing around with kind of jokes and like how to work an audience. You remember his famous appearance on Laughing when he says "suck it to me." That takes courage and humor, which is basically what courage is, to mock yourself. And of course, he's very loyal to his friends. Rose Woods was his secretary for decades. B.B. Rebozo and Alice Roosevelt Longworth herself, the doyen of this novel, was a friend for decades, and he's very kind of enamored by the whole Kennedy mystique. Of course, he kind of hates it because it destroyed him earlier in his career, and but he's outlived it, and in a sense, he's developing his own mystique. Of course, it's built on a kind of much more kind of sinister grounds, and a lot of the other characters don't have much animosity towards Nixon. That's interesting because, of course, they do prison time for him, and usually that's one way when you think, in these kind of criminal conspiracies, I kept the murder, I kept my mouth shut, I did my time, and what did the other guy do? Nixon got a pardon before he was even charged with anything, and but like the characters don't feel much animosity towards him because I don't think they really knew him. In that he was quite evasive in that regard. He was guarded. He wouldn't let you into his real self. So we don't really get the Anthony Hopkins Nixon in the Oliver Stone film where, with all the curses, all the expletive deleted, and the heavy drinking and the bitterness and the bigotry and the walking around talking to the paintings and those sorts of things. It probably stems from Mallon's conservatism that he would portray Nixon that way, and of course there are parallels now with the presidency of Donald Trump, or whether we get a second presidency, because obviously people around Trump are becoming convicts, and his entourage are doing prison time. It's interesting, like those who have disowned him and those who have turned on him and those who are still loyal to him. And those who are probably hedging their bets, thinking, "Will he get in? Will I get a second pardon?" or things like that. So, the great thing about Watergate is it's very, very relevant today. It's an easy read. It's about 450 pages, but they absolutely fly by. Pair it with a good cocktail or a good bourbon. Give it that kind of DC high society vibes, and just enjoy the caustic wit of it. It's an absolutely fantastic read. Okay, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time on another episode of Ellroy Reads. Bye bye.